Scarface wasn't just controversy wrapped in white dust, it was a prophecy disguised as excess, a blueprint for hip-hop culture hiding inside a crime epic. Critics savaged it, cities banned it, Pacino nearly walked away, but beneath the chainsaw in the mansion stood something Hollywood didn't expect, a film that would rewrite how America saw ambition, violence, and the immigrant dream turned nightmare. A script written during addiction, predicting its own destruction. Michelle Pfeiffer terrified on set, not by direction but by her co-star's intensity. These are the 18 hidden details in Scarface you completely missed. Number 18. The most infamous sequence in Scarface almost destroyed the film before audiences ever saw it. The MPAA threatened an X rating, insisting the bathroom chainsaw massacre was too graphic for theaters. Brian De Palma fought back with precision, challenging censors to identify a single frame where the chainsaw actually touched flesh. They couldn't find one. The violence exists entirely in viewer imagination, constructed through sound design by Randy Tom, reaction shots, and Stephen Bauer's terror as he watches helplessly. De Palma proved the MPAA was reacting to imagined gore, not actual footage. The board had no choice but to approve the scene uncut. Sound designer Skip Lievze later revealed the chainsaw audio was layered with animal screams to maximize psychological impact. Number 17. Tony Montana's iconic facial scar wasn't reapplied fresh every morning like typical movie makeup. Special effects artist Tom Savini, known for his work on Dawn of the Dead, created a semi-permanent prosthetic designed to stay attached for days at a time. The appliance bonded to Pacino's skin with industrial-grade medical adhesive, becoming part of his face throughout production, but removal was brutal. The adhesive ripped away skin layers each time it came off, causing genuine tissue damage. Makeup supervisor Ken Chase documented increasing inflammation as filming progressed. By the final week of production, Pacino had developed a faint real scar along the exact path where the fake one had been applied. Method acting taken to a painful, unintended extreme that left permanent marks. Number 16. While Al Pacino performed an exaggerated Cuban accent despite being Italian-American, Stephen Bauer brought lived experience to every scene. Bauer was born Esteban Ernesto Echevarria Sampson in Havana and fled to Miami as a child during the mass Cuban exodus of the early 1960s. He understood immigrant struggle, cultural dislocation, and the specific rhythms of Cuban-American speech in ways Pacino could only approximate. Throughout production, Bauer quietly coached Pacino on accent work and mannerisms. Dialect coach Robert Easton officially supervised, but Bauer provided the authentic emotional reality of exile. Ironically, Bauer's grounded performance as Manny Ribera received far less critical attention than Pacino's theatrical interpretation. The real Cuban played second to the performance of Cuban-ness in a film about authenticity. Number 15. The palatial compound where Tony Montana lives out his powder kingpin fantasy wasn't built on a studio lot. Production designer Ferdinando Scarfiotti selected El Furadis, an actual mansion in Montecito, California, built in 1906. The sprawling Mediterranean revival estate looked like excess personified. Scarfiotti didn't construct that massive fountain or gaudy interior design, it already existed. And here's where reality gets stranger. The property had rumored connections to organized crime figures throughout the 1970s, whispered associations the location team discovered only after scouting was complete. Location manager Janice Polly later confirmed they learned about the property's checkered history mid-production. Life had already imitated the art before the art existed. The mansion was Tony Montana's aesthetic before Oliver Stone wrote the character. Number 14.
Say hello to my little friend.
Wasn't written by Oliver Stone. It doesn't appear anywhere in the original screenplay or any revised drafts. Pacino invented it during the final mansion shootout, a moment of pure improvisational instinct as Tony Montana makes his powder-fueled last stand. Director Brian De Palma loved the line immediately, recognizing its absurd bravado perfectly captured Tony's delusional self-mythology even as bullets tore through him. Script supervisor Betty Griffin noted the improvisation in her records, but never imagined it would become the film's most quoted dialogue. The line has been referenced in hundreds of films, television shows, and rap songs across 4 decades. Pacino later admitted to interviewer James Lipton he doesn't even remember saying it, blacked out on performance adrenaline. Number 13. In one of her breakout roles as Elvira Hancock, Michelle Pfeiffer delivered a performance of icy detachment and quiet disdain. That coldness wasn't just acting. Pfeiffer was genuinely unnerved by Pacino's intensity throughout production. He stayed in character between takes, maintaining Tony Montana's volatile unpredictability even when cameras stopped rolling. Pfeiffer later told Rolling Stone she never knew which version of Pacino she'd encounter on set, the professional actor or the unhinged kingpin. That uncertainty kept her perpetually on edge. Acting coach Peggy Fury, who worked with Pfeiffer during production, helped her channel that real anxiety into Elvira's emotional distance. The performance you see on screen is partly calculated technique and partly authentic unease. Pacino's method approach created an environment where fear became indistinguishable from performance. Number 12. All that white powder Tony Montana snorts throughout Scarface was a mixture of powdered milk and pharmaceutical-grade baby laxative, chosen because it mimicked powder's visual texture. Pacino inhaled massive quantities during the months-long shoot, snorting it repeatedly for take after take across dozens of scenes. The milk powder accumulated in his nasal passages, creating chronic sinus infections that worsened as production dragged on. Set medic Barbara Hunter documented increasing inflammation and bleeding as filming progressed. By the final weeks, Pacino's nose was legitimately bleeding between takes, his sinuses inflamed and raw from constant irritation. Production had to halt multiple times so he could recover enough to continue. Special effects coordinator Ken Pepiot later admitted they underestimated the physical toll of repeated fake drug use. Number 11. When the film opened in December 1983, several municipal governments refused to allow theaters to screen it. The violence was too graphic, the language too profane, the portrayal of Cuban immigrants too inflammatory. Miami city officials, led by Mayor Morris Ferre, tried to block production entirely before filming even began. They feared Scarface would permanently damage the city's image and tourist economy. The Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce argued the film portrayed the city as a war zone controlled by drug cartels. Ironically, Scarface became a massive cultural phenomenon within Miami's Cuban American community, who saw it as a twisted but honest reflection of the exile experience. Film historian Frank P. Tomasolo documented how the city that tried to kill the film ended up embracing it as accidental folk art. Number 10. Screenwriter Oliver Stone has openly admitted he was deep in powder addiction while writing Scarface, channeling his personal spiral into Tony Montana's psychological descent. The paranoia, the grandiosity, the self-destruction, all of it came from lived experience documented in Stone's later memoir. The script was a warning he gave himself, a prophecy he wrote but didn't heed until years later when his own life collapsed. Stone's writing partner Stanley Weiser later confirmed Stone was spiraling badly during the drafting process. The violence of Tony's fall mirrored Stone's internal chaos, addiction projected onto celluloid before Stone himself hit bottom. Writing became confession for the future platoon director, and the confessional honesty is what gives Scarface its uncomfortable authenticity that resonates decades later. Number 9. That neon blimp floating above Miami with the phrase, "The world is yours," isn't random set decoration. It's a recurring visual motif carefully placed by production designer Ferdinando Scarfiotti in over a dozen scenes throughout the film. Brian De Palma used it as a symbolic reminder of Tony's ambition and the delusion driving his rise. If you watch closely, the blimp appears in backgrounds during key moments of Tony's ascent and collapse, visible through windows, reflected in glass, floating silently over conversations about power and loyalty. Cinematographer John A. Alonzo deliberately framed it into compositions where most viewers wouldn't consciously notice. It's always there, always mocking, always promising what Tony can never truly possess. De Palma later told Film Comment magazine the blimp functioned like a Greek chorus whispering lies. Number 8. Tony Montana's last stand against Sosa's hit squad used over 200 explosive squibs, small pyrotechnic charges that simulate bullet impacts. Special effects coordinator Ken Pepiot designed a protective vest for Pacino covered in blood packets, and the crew detonated them in rapid sequence to create the illusion of Tony absorbing impossible amounts of gunfire. The scene took 3 full days to film because squibs constantly misfired, exploded prematurely, or failed to trigger at all. Stunt coordinator Pat Johnson documented 19 separate attempts before achieving a usable take. When the sequence finally worked, Pacino was so covered in stage blood he looked submerged in red paint. The makeup team, led by Tom Berman, had to clean and reset him completely between takes, a process requiring over an hour each time. Number 7. Future Academy Award winner F. Murray Abraham, who would win Best Actor for Amadeus just 1 year after Scarface, appears in the film for approximately 10 seconds. He plays the shadowy assassin who murders Omar Suarez in the hanging sequence, visible only as a silhouette with a gun. Abraham took the tiny role because he needed rent money and had no other work lined up at the time. Casting director Alex Gordon later confirmed Abraham was hired for a single day's work at minimum Screen Actors Guild rates. 1 year later, he stood on the Academy Awards stage accepting the Oscar for Best Actor, beating out his Scarface co-star Al Pacino, who was nominated for another film. Number 6. Composer Giorgio Moroder created a pulsing electronic score for Scarface that sounded nothing like typical 1983 cinema music. Critics hated it, calling the synthesizers cold, mechanical, and emotionally detached. The score felt futuristic in ways audiences found alienating, too synthetic for a film grounded in violent realism. Variety's review specifically criticized the lifeless electronic wash that accompanied scenes throughout the film. But fast forward 3 decades, and Moroder's Scarface soundtrack became the foundational blueprint for the entire synthwave genre. Artists like Kavinsky College and Cliff Martinez cited it as direct inspiration for retro-futuristic electronic music that dominated the 2010s. Music historian Simon Reynolds documented this influence extensively in his writings on electronic music evolution. The score that flopped in 1983 became a cult classic studied by a new generation of musicians. Number 5. Miriam Kolan, who played Tony's judgmental, disapproving mother, used method techniques to maintain authentic contempt throughout production. She stayed in character off camera, deliberately avoiding friendly interaction with Pacino between takes. Kolan wanted her disgust for Tony to feel genuine, unperformed, rooted in real emotional distance. So she treated Pacino coldly during breaks, refused casual conversation, and maintained an atmosphere of maternal rejection even when cameras weren't rolling. Acting coach Stella Adler, who had taught Kolan years earlier, endorsed this approach of sustained emotional authenticity. Pacino later admitted in interviews with James Lipton her coldness hurt his feelings until he realized it was intentional performance strategy. Assistant director Louis Race documented the tension in production notes, initially concerned it was genuine conflict between the actors. The dynamic worked perfectly on screen. Number 4. Oliver Stone's original screenplay was nearly 4 hours long, packed with subplots about CIA drug smuggling, political corruption, and Tony's extended family. Brian De Palma cut entire storylines while cameras were rolling, rewriting scenes overnight with script supervisor Betty Griffin, and informing actors the next morning that their characters had been eliminated. Some performers showed up to set only to discover they'd been written out entirely, their arcs condensed or deleted without warning. Production manager Martin Bregman later confirmed the chaos created genuine anxiety among the cast. Nobody's sure if their character would survive the next round of cuts. Editor Gerald B. Greenberg had to assemble sequences from radically different script versions that shifted daily. Number 3. Midway through filming, Al Pacino told Brian De Palma he wanted to walk off the project entirely. He felt Tony Montana was too dark, too irredeemable, a character so consumed by greed and violence that audiences would reject him completely. Pacino worried the role would alienate fans and damage his career permanently. Producer Martin Bregman later revealed they seriously considered shutting down production if Pacino left because no other actor could step into the role mid-shoot. De Palma talked him down by reframing Tony as a Shakespearean tragic figure, a modern Macbeth whose ambition destroys him from within. He stopped trying to make Tony likable or sympathetic and leaned fully into the monster, embracing the character's inevitable destruction. Number 2. That iconic image of Al Pacino in a white suit holding an M16 rifle was photographed during pre-production as a marketing test, shot months before a single frame of the actual film was captured. Photographer Nancy Ellison conducted the session in a studio setup with Pacino, costume designer Patricia Norris, and prop master Robert Vichelia. The studio wanted to gauge audience interest and secure financing, so they created the poster first and used it to sell the movie that hadn't been made yet. The image became so culturally embedded, so synonymous with Scarface, that Brian De Palma had to recreate it during actual production, just to match the marketing already circulating in trade publications and investor meetings. Number 1. When Scarface premiered in December 1983, it was a box office disappointment and a critical disaster. Roger Ebert gave it 1.5 stars, calling it excessive and emotionally empty. The film barely broke even theatrically, widely considered a failure that would fade quickly from cultural memory. Then VHS happened. Home video gave Scarface a second life, allowing viewers to rewatch, quote, and obsess over every scene without theatrical time limits. Video store owner Kim's Video in New York reported it became their most rented title by 1987. By the 1990s, the film had become a cultural phenomenon, quoted religiously by rappers like Nas and Jay-Z, studied like gospel by filmmakers, referenced in video games as the ultimate crime epic. Scarface didn't just survive rejection, it weaponized failure into mythology, transforming critical dismissal into cult immortality. From milk powder that scarred Pacino's sinuses to a poster designed before the film existed, from improvised lines that became cultural mantras to a blimp that never stopped watching, the production was built on chaos disguised as control. Which hidden detail surprised you most, and what classic crime film should we dissect next?